Okay, good morning. Let's start. So today we'll study Link Layer Security Part 2, which is we'll specifically study DHCP attacks today. And also we'll look at what ARP protocols are. Okay, so in order to understand any attack, we must understand how these protocols work. Okay, so first part will be revision of what you have studied in your networking course. And then of course, we'll later on, we'll study how cyber criminals can attack using vulnerabilities of these protocols. Okay. All right. I'm sure you would have studied DHCP protocol in detail. Okay, there's also possibility that you might not have studied this because you have not done link layer protocols, right? But nevertheless, I'm assuming some of you have not done it, especially MTech students. So we'll revise this. Okay. So we have started our discussion on network security, and we are going bottom up. Okay, so we started with physical layer, and we have seen how vulnerable physical layers are, and we see a lot of attacks happen at physical layer. Okay, all right, and then we have moved on to data link layer, and data link layer today is de facto Ethernet. And we have seen how Ethernets work, uses CS513 protocol. Okay, and then we have studied the concept of switches and then self-learning of switches, right? Based on self-learning, transmission can happen. And we have also seen how, because of self-learning, if switch has not learned about a destination, then it broadcasts Ethernet packets. And then, if the switch topology or switch graph has loop, then broadcast storm can happen. Why? Because all the switches can continue to broadcast frames. Okay, so in order to avoid that, we have something called spanning tree protocol. And okay, so and then we have seen that one kind of attack that's possible is because of the limited size of switching table inside a switch, right? And table size is always fixed, right? Smaller the switch, smaller the table size. Larger enterprise switch, it may be a bigger table, switching table. Okay. Similarly, we have, like in layer 2, we have basically a switch table, while in layer 3 we have routing tables, right? Okay. So now we are now because the fixed size of these tables, switching tables, if there is a cyber criminal, it can it can change the MAC address very rapidly, and then fill in the camp table, because every time MAC address changes, a entry will be formed in switching table, because it the frame has come from particular MAC address and it has come in a port in the switch. So port mapping with MAC address is maintained in the table, right? So if the cyber criminal keeps changing this MAC randomly, it can basically consume all entries of switching table, and as a result of that, any other Mac or any other computer wants to communicate with something else, his or her, messages will be broadcasted. Okay, and because of the broadcast, efficiency of switch will come down. So that was a CAM overflow attack. Okay, so today we'll look at a DHCP attack, and before that we'll study what DHCP is, and then we'll see how these attacks are possible. Okay, and we'll look at how ARP works. Okay, these are the references. I think the content in the PPT is sufficient. So however you can read also from these sources. I would strongly recommend you to go through the book, this book, right, by Kuros and Ross. This is one of the very well written book, very nice book, right? So if you really want to understand networking, please go through contents of this book. Okay, all right, okay. Do you know how DHCP works? Any one of you? Deep, Gupta, can you tell me?
No, sir, I don't have idea what DHCP tags.
Oh, you don't have. Okay, all right. So anyway, we'll just a minute. Okay, we'll study that. Okay, no problem. Okay, note that at link layer or data link layer or layer 2, we have two protocols that are primarily used for discovery. These are called link layer discovery protocols. These are DHCP, which is dynamic host configuration protocol, and second is ARP, address resolution protocol. So we'll cover both in today's class, and we'll see how we can, a cyber criminal can attack vulnerabilities of these protocols. And basically vulnerabilities are very similar. Okay. Now note that these are confined to single LAN. Okay. When we say LAN, it's basically LAN consisting of multiple switches, but within one domain. Okay, within one, I don't mean IP domain or something. It's kind of, we are often called subnet. Okay, so if there are multiple switches here, okay, then when we say it is one LAN, it may have multiple switches. Then what does it mean? It means that whatever I am sending from here can go to somewhere else on Ethernet address. We don't need IP address here, right? That's one way of looking at it. The other is that when there is a broadcast, because all these switches will learn, that this max, say M1 is at this port, M2 is at port number 2. So this is learning. Okay, when, for example, M1 is sending it to M7, for example, then this switch need to know where to send it to, right? So the path is as follows, right? So this, how will it come to know about this port, that M7 is on this particular port? It will come to know when in the past M7 has communicated a message to any one of the machines on this side. So it would have come to know that something is coming from M7 is connected to this port. That's all, right? If that understanding is not there, then broadcast will happen. Okay, so broadcast will reach each and every machine. Okay, if the broadcast reaches each and every machine, then we can say that it's a LAN. All right, you understood? LAN doesn't mean that we have just one switch with number of ports. That's the simplest possible LAN. We can always say this. Let's say this is computer 1, computer 2, and so on. So we can say this is a LAN like we have at home, but it can also be a large number of switches interconnected, but limited by wherein communication can happen over MAC address. All right, you understood? Any doubt? Okay. Now these protocols rely on broadcast capability of LAN. As we said, there is a broadcast, right? Okay. So it means that this protocol are dependent that the network is capable of broadcasting. Simple. So let's go back to the diagram where Alice is sitting in a coffee shop and she has opened up her computer, rebooted it, Okay, and she wants to do something on Google. Okay, now first thing she needs is that she needs IP address. And apart from IP address, she also needs a lot of other parameters, right? She needs first hop router. Because the packets have got to go outside world. In order to go to outside world, she has to send the packet to particular node. Okay, so suppose there are multiple nodes are there in LAN, right? She is connected, her laptop is here, and this is a router, and from there outside world is connected, right? So she has to know the Ethernet address of this, okay, or IP address of this. Okay, and then once she from this she can directly, if she knows IP address, she can find out its MAC address, and then can she directly send message to this router, and router can in turn, because router does routing, layer 3 routing, can send the frame or packet outside. Simple. All right. Now, so there's a role of first hop router. Okay, and apart from that, it has other parameters which we'll look in just a few moments, right? So most important thing that of course it needs to get is okay, just a minute, IP address, right? So right now she is looking for IP address. Of course, first hop address is also equally important, and few other things, right? Okay, of course, domain name, server, and so on. Okay, so her laptop will say, can somebody help, and one of the servers will respond back. That we have seen in the last class. Okay, now so she needs an IP address. When I say she, it means that her machine or laptop needs IP address. Okay, and whose does it know, or her laptop doesn't know what is the IP address. Her machine doesn't know IP address. She needs to get the IP address, right? But she doesn't know whom to ask for IP address. Because she is just booted and the whole network is new, right? She has come to coffee shop, the laptop doesn't know anyone, right? There is no mapping available, and mapping is also not required here, right? Okay, so host doesn't know whom to ask for IP address. Okay, it basically the machine doesn't know which machine to ask for IP address, so doesn't know anything about it, right? So she will say that her laptop will say, okay, she will broadcast a message, please help me with the configuration parameters. All right, so her machine will send a broadcast message on this one, please help me. Okay, and the protocol here is DHCP. Now before moving forward, I will ask you this question. Why, say for example, your Ethernet, your laptop has Ethernet, and then Ethernet address is there. It's kind of permanently there, right? Very rarely you will change it. Okay, and you move from a hostel to home to somewhere else, maybe US, and that address remains the same. We can say that Ethernet address is kind of permanent. I'm asking you why IP address cannot be given permanently. Why Alice's laptop doesn't have permanent IP address? Can someone answer? Tanuja, can you answer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I think it depends upon the location. So whenever we change the location, the system, the network needs to know that we have changed the location.
Yeah, very good. So basically, see in Ethernet, local area network, you can broadcast. Your domain is limited, and you can discover, right? So other things, right? In internet, where is domain is I mean, in the domain there will be billions of machines or nodes. You cannot do broadcast. The first answer, right? And second is the routing requires some information in the IP address, that this IP address belongs to a particular area. Okay, so there is a implicit or or intelligently kind of coded information in IP address. Looking at IP address, one can know which part of the world it belongs to. Okay, so it's a dependent on location. That's how routing can happen. Otherwise, there's no way to do routing, because if the IP address is same and a person moves or laptop moves from one place to another, it would be very similar to kind of what we do in case of mobile phones, right? In mobile phone, numbers are of course related to area, but you can easily move somewhere else. The number doesn't change. Okay, but the whole mechanism is quite complicated. So what happens? Similarly, we have concept of mobile IP, but basic concept in mobile phone is that when you go to, say for example, you are in Bombay and you go to Goa, okay, and as soon as your mobile phone, you switch on mobile phone in Goa, it registers with local registry. Okay, and that local registry informs your home registry, wherever your mobile phone is registered or the SIM is registered in the beginning, or your service provider is there. Okay, like for me, my phone is registered with Vodafone Bangalore in Whitefield, right? And if I go to Goa, so my phone registered with local registry, okay, which you call the VLR, and then that VLR informs my home location register or home database that I am currently in Goa. So when phone call comes from someone, then first it comes to my home location register or home database, and that says that okay, I am in Goa, and so my call gets forwarded. So it's very complicated. So routing requires always location information. Okay, remember this, right? So so for example, you see, all of us, our address, even physical address, right, has some location information, right? So I live in, for example, a colony in place in Marthalli, which is part of Whitefield, or Bangalore, and then there's a location, right? So I cannot have somebody cannot write. If I move to Goa, then somebody writes me a letter with my Bangalore address, it will not automatically go there. Okay, and the letter is, let's assume, coming from Delhi, then based on my destination address, it will come. Okay, so all the post office in between will forward it accordingly. Similarly, IP addresses are location dependent. Now within corporate, of course, you can move around, but it's location. That's the reason, when we move to different place, then laptop needs an IP address. Okay, all right, got it? Okay, let's move forward. So now DHCP, let's assume the DHCP server is in the LAN. There's a possibility also DHCP server is not in the LAN. So we'll not look at that scenario. So the DHCP server is in the LAN. Okay, so client will broadcast DHCP discovery message, right? That this is a discovery message. It will broadcast it. You see that is a broadcast address. So it broadcasted to all. Okay, all nodes, whether it may be a regular laptop of somebody, but everyone will receive it. Okay, and then DHCP server, there may be multiple DHCP servers, and they will respond back. So here there are two DHCP servers, they will look at the DHCP request or discovery message and respond back with the offer. Now, this DHCP server have pool of IP address and so on and so forth, right? They would have acquired through other connections. So, and they will offer, okay, you can use a particular IP address and other parameters. Okay, and these parameters are IP address, net mask, DNS, domain name server's IP address, and the first of default router. And I'm sure you know all of this, like net mask is used for subnetting or CIDR address or whatever you call it. Right? So, all right. So now this guy has multiple offers available. Like Alice's laptop has multiple offers available. Now she will pick up one of these. Okay, so this is the step. You know, Alice. So Alice is here in a cafe. She sends DHCP discover message. She broadcasts or she shouts. Her laptop shouts, "Okay, please help me with configuration parameters." And there are multiple servers. Okay, and one of them will respond. So all of them will respond, and she will pick up only one of these offers. So let's assume that now she receives the DHCP offer. Okay, and this DHCP offer, of course, contains IP address, gateway router's IP address, and then lease time, of course. How long this mapping is valid, because IP address given to a client has a lifetime. The client may close the laptop and move away. Doesn't mean that that IP address cannot be used by anybody else, right? So there is always lease time, and of course net mask. Okay, so she receives all these messages, offers from multiple ones, and okay, so we know what DNS server is. Okay, we also know gateway router by now, right? So now this is the next step. Then she picks up one of those and then broadcasts that this request contains all these parameters, what she has got in the message, and selected one. All those parameters are listed here, and she will broadcast it to all. And then it will be seen by all nodes. Of course, regular laptops will reject it right away. The DHCP server which is selected knows that now my IP address, the IP address of Alice is this much. So this machine will not reuse it for least period time. All other DHCP servers whose response or offer has not been selected will understand it and then can use those IP addresses that those were offered to some other client. Okay, all right. And the selected DHCP server will respond it with ECK message. All right, now she has all these parameters, and the server knows that I have leased it out to her for a certain period of time. Any question? Okay, so let's go ahead and see the next step. Just a minute. Wow, there's little problem. Okay, it's here. Okay, so next step is as follows, that we have seen just here, is depicted here differently. Okay, so this machine selects one of the offers that it has received and then broadcasts it on the LAN. So it goes to all. Okay, and then the server which was selected responds back that this is acknowledgement that you will have to use these parameters, and like IP address, gateway address, net mask, and lease time. Okay, and now this guy has all these configuration parameter which it can use. Okay, now here note that some messages are sent in broadcast mode, some are sent in unicast mode. Like DHCP discover, when she is shouting, it goes to all. Okay, now offer goes in offer, because this machine knows the MAC address of this, so this machine sends to the machine here in unicast mode. Okay, now this machine sends the request here again in broadcast mode, because all DHCP servers who have offered must know this mapping, right? That I have accepted one mapping, so they can reuse their whatever offers they have made. And this acknowledgement is again unicast or one-to-one. Okay, so there are two broadcasts and two unicasts. The protocol, however, says that instead of unicast, we can also use broadcast. Like this, the offer here can also be broadcast. Okay, so that's what's mentioned here. But let's assume that's a unicast. Okay, and this is the format. The DHCP, server will, Alice laptop will send the message, then it will use this format, and then the server will, DHCP server will respond back again, same format is used, right? Like important parameters, of course, are the IP address that you are seeking for, or Alice machine seeking for, on server will respond back by putting values here, gateway IP address, and server name. Okay, so these, of course, when for different set of messages, these parameters could be, we will set by different parties, right? Okay, and the client may ask for release. So for example, my laptop is using IP address given by DHCP server, and time is expired, then I may ask for release. Give me some same IP address for some more time. So there is also provision for that. Okay. All right. So these are the parameters. We are not going to go into it details. Okay. All right. Please read. And these are the messages. DHCP discover we have seen, DHCP offer. Then, so Alice machine initially sent DHCP discover to everyone. Please send me the configuration parameters. Then all DHCP servers respond with the DHCP offer, and then her machine picks up one and say that please give me this, and this is a broadcast message, and then the selected server will respond with DHCP ACK. Okay, because of some reason that server may also say we cannot give. Okay, so there is a message called DHCP NAC. And then DHCP decline, DHCP release. After some time, machine may want to release the mapping. So, like your laptop, Alice laptop may say, now my job is over. Let me close it. Okay, so her machine will release the IP address and configuration parameters and so on, right? So this is what we have seen. Where is the threat here? Where is the threat? Anyone can think of a threat? So you are sitting in a classroom and one friend asks you, what is your password? Okay, password of some account. And you shout, my bank's account's password is this. Is it secure? No. Everyone is listening, right? So note that whenever there is a broadcast, information is available to all. Can be misused? Of course it can be misused, right? And this is the threat. Okay. Now, when these protocols were designed, whether IP or Ethernet, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, etc., security was never a concern. The designers assume that everyone is honest, and these are all protocols are designed. All basic protocols are designed. Okay. So now local attacker on the same subnet can hear all the communication that has been happening wherever there is a broadcast. Like here, the attacker will come to know about what? Alice's MAC address. Okay. And Alice's MAC address will come to know because she has broadcasted with her MAC address. And now whenever DHCP request is going, okay, then all the parameters are available here. IP, all this IP address, gateway address, lease, and so on. That information is also available. Can an attacker exploit this? Of course, yes. These are the two threats, right? So first is very simple: is DHCP starvation attack. What is starvation? Who is starving? Okay. So simple thing is that a gobbler. So note that number of IP addresses are limited. Okay, with DHCP server. Whenever requests come, it assigns one. So this gobbler can do one thing. It can change its MAC address. Okay, it will generate the MAC addresses, randomized MAC addresses, a random MAC address, and send a request. What request? DHCP discover request. Okay, and server will respond. Now we'll change the MAC address again, send the request, will respond back, keep it. In this way, very fast, at a very high speed, can grab almost all MAC addresses or almost all IP addresses. Okay, so gobblers look at the entire DHCP scope and tries to lease all DHCP addresses available in DHCP scope. DHCP scope is nothing but all, parameters or all IP addresses that are available. Okay, so now what will happen? This guy has grabbed everything. So any other person, say Alice or Bob, wants IP address, then will not get it. Okay, this is very simple attack. Okay, now here he doesn't need to know anything. Alice's MAC address or any information, right? Okay, the countermeasure is what? Countermeasure is that this switch. See, if you buy Linksys router for home, you can get it for 2,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees, something like that, right? With good number of ports. But if you buy Cisco's high-end enterprise router, the cost will go into thousands of dollars. So what is the reason for that? The low-end routers don't have any of these provisions. Okay, while high-end routers have a lot of mechanism to take care of these things. So one such mechanism is that number of MAC addresses associated with a port, if we limit it, say 2 per port or something, so this gobbler can change it, the MAC, whatever number of MAC address generates, only 2 will be accepted. All right, so we can limit number of requests or number of IP address this guy can get. This is one simplest way of preventing. Second is that the switch can be intelligent and can find out that this is multiple requests are coming from on a particular port. There can be some malicious activity. Okay, all right. So intelligent switches can always find this out, but very simple switches that we use at home, these attacks are possible. Okay, there's the first attack that we have seen. Second is called snooping attack. Snooping means that attacker is looking at all the data, what Alice is sending and what DSC server is sending, right? So what will happen? The Alice will send a request, and the attacker will see that Alice, a particular MAC from particular MAC address, is requesting IP addresses, right? IP address and other parameters. What he can do, assuming attacker is man, all right? Okay, what can he do? He can just pretend to be a DHCP server and then send malicious data. What malicious data? It will give some IP address, it will give some gateway address, some domain name server address, and so on and so forth, right? DNS server address and so on. Okay, now how can it be misused? For example, simplest thing is that, for example, Alice gets wrong DNS server name, and she will now send a request for google.com to that server, and that is malicious server and can respond with a some address, IP address, and could belong to a malicious site. Okay, all right. And second thing is that it can also do some other kinds of attacks, right? It can give its own IP address. Okay, so there are multiple kinds of attacks are possible. Okay, here what happens is that the attacker sends malicious data, okay, which can be wrong DNS server name, wrong default router, wrong IP address, and duplicate IP address. And you can see that with each one of these, attacks are possible, right? So for example, simplest one of these is fake gateway router. Now, if Alice's IP packets have got to go to outside world, and then it will go to a fake IP router, right, which will look at all the data. All right. Duplicate address attack is that you give malicious DHCP server can give the IP address that's already in use. Okay. So in order to do all this attack, the response from DHCP server has to be faster than the message response from original DHCP server. Only then the client will accept the one which gets first, right? So it's not that always this guy will win, but can try to be faster, and there's a possibility they can win. Okay, so first attack is a duplicate addresses are given to multiple clients. So now there's a denial of service. If two machines have same IP address, then it will cause conflicts, right? Okay. Other is that malicious website address, right? I mean, let's say domain name server. So if in as DHCP response, it gets an address of malicious DNS server, and this when client sends, Alice sends this request, what is the IP address of google.com, it will respond that it's with IP address of a malicious website or malicious machine. Okay. And so the countermeasures are also simpler. The machine has to be good. The router has to be good. Okay. A router and one thing can be done is that, at what port DHCP server is connected. If that is always fixed or known, or DHCP server is within the trusted zone. Okay, we have studied this concept, right? right? I mean, TCP concept we have studied. So it's within the TCP, then this kind of attacks can be limited. Okay, it means that a client like Alice machine or laptop will accept requests that are coming from trusted parties, right? Or servers connected on particular port. Of course, the machine will not come to know about it, but switch will take care of this. The switch will know that if DHCP offer is coming from a port which does not supposed to have DHCP server, then it can take care of this kind of vulnerability. Okay, and then of course is that number of number of requests can be limited. So first is of course the trusted port. This is a trusted port, so it will like this switch will accept the request and not accept the request from untrusted port. That's a DHCP offer. Okay. Second is that limit the number of requests, number of MAC addresses from a particular port. So these are the two measures. Okay, and this concept has been used in the attack, and one of the very famous attack is a DNS changer attack, happened in 2012. You can get the details from here. Now what it does is that here the role of DHCP server is to give the malicious IP address. So it's something like this. Attack can be formed as follows, right? I mean, attacker have created malicious or some code which your machine will download. For example, when browsing something, it will ask for some drivers. Okay, and you search the driver, it will go to web, internet and search, and somewhere you find this driver, you download it, and that is nothing but Trojan. Okay, so this Trojan is nothing but malicious software that will start doing things in your machine or in your laptop. Okay, and then first thing is that it will change domain name server. Okay, which will lead you to phishing site. Now the whole attack can be planned in such a way that that Trojan that has been downloaded will act also. They will use one of the attacks that we have seen, which is DHCP attack, and change the domain name server name. Okay, and right, and so on. Okay, and for that it uses DHCP. All right, please read about this in detail. So DHCP attack we have seen in concept. It totally depends on the broadcast mechanism. Okay, of course, first attack we have seen where it grabs all changes MAC address and grabs the whole scope of DHCP. That of course can be done. Okay, at any point in time, but all other attacks uses this gets information through broadcasts that are being done. Okay, and there are countermeasures that we have seen. All right, any question? Okay, all right, so let's move to ARP. Okay, here in this example, let's assume the domain name server exists in the same subnet. So as a response, as an offer, Alice's machine has got IP address of domain name server. Okay. Now Alice wants to reach this server, which is on same net, same local area network, but she has got only IP address. But no IP, see, messages, within a subnet or within a local area network uses MAC address. If her machine knows the IP address, she cannot reach that until she knows the MAC address of that, because the IP packet finally get inserted in the Ethernet frame, right? And then frame will go, and then and then it will be packet will be taken out there. So she needs to know the MAC address of DNS, domain name server. Okay, so something like this, that this is Alice's machine, and she has got this mapping, right? IP address, net mask, DNS, and router. And DNS server is right here. Now she needs, from domain name server, she wants to know what is the IP address of google.com. IP address of this, right? Is there somewhere in outside this network, right? This is outside this local area network, google.com exists, right? But she needs to know IP address. But what she has got is DNS servers IP address. Now using IP address of DNS server, this one, she cannot communicate, because her finally something that will go here is Ethernet frame. So she needs to know the hardware address or MAC address of DNS server. Okay. Now, in order to know that, she has to use this protocol, which is called address resolution protocol, which gives a mapping between IP address, which she knows, IP address of any machine, to MAC address of that machine. This mapping is nothing but is the outcome of address resolution protocol. Okay, so this is what it is. So she knows the IP address, but she doesn't know the hardware address. Okay, but this machine needs to know hardware address in order to communicate to this machine, right? For further, in order to get google.com's IP address. Okay, so what will she do? She will okay. So what machine will do is that, okay, now each host maintains this table. Okay, it's called ARP table, which is IP address to MAC address and time to live. How much time this mapping is applicable, right? So when Alice's laptop tries to find out what is the MAC address of IP address of the machine that we have seen just here, she knows IP address. She will first look at the local table, and she will not find it. Okay, because she has just booted the machine. She has come to the cafe. Okay, and in the past she has not come to the cafe, so that mapping doesn't exist. Anyway, if the mapping existed in the past, the TTL would have expired. Okay, so the entry would have been cleaned up from her laptop. All right, so it's not in the table, then her laptop will shout or broadcast, who has this IP address? Okay, and then that server will respond with a MAC address. Okay, so the server with that IP address there will look at the message and say, come to know that, okay, it's the message is for me, and respond back with its own MAC address. Okay, so in this way, Alice's machine will get MAC address of the domain name server. Now, there is also provision in the protocol wherein there might be other machines that will have this mapping of domain name server to MAC address. Well, they would have used in the past, right? The protocol also says that yes, anyone can respond. So other machines in the same subnet can store this information in their ARP table. This information may be there and they may respond. Okay, because this whole mechanism is based on total trust. And when other machine sees this mapping, those don't have this mapping can also store in their table this mapping. Okay, so IP address to MAC address mapping they can store in their own table. All right. Now the question I'm asking is that, is there any issue? Note this thing, wherever there is a broadcast, there can be issue. Attacker has an opportunity. Okay. So we'll see in the next class all this unsolicited response. Send ERP response with incorrect mapping, because any machine can respond back. And then we can also do man in the middle attack. So this we'll study in the next class. Okay. The self-reading for you, just see how we can spoof MAC addresses, right? Okay. So anybody can change the MAC address and play with it. All right. So please go through it. It's very simple attack. Nothing in it actually. So the whole idea is that anybody can pose as anybody else, because everything is visible in local area network. You know, I mean, there are multiple machines and I want to disrupt communication between two machines. Okay, say L. So I am 2D and want to disrupt the communication which Alice is doing with Bob. I will change my MAC address to Alice's MAC address. Okay, what will happen? The table will, the switch will change the mapping. If I communicate, the 2D is communicating, it will you know, note at the MAC address and say that it's on connected on particular port. Next time when Bob responds back, then instead of the message going to Alice, it will come to me, or me means 2D. Okay, so this kind of attacks are possible. What we have mentioned is just one attack. All right. Okay. So to summarize, DHCP and ARP are both on trust and broadcast mechanism. And any attacker can exploit this to do any kind of attack, including MITM attack. All right. Any question? What we studied is, first is the DHCP protocol we have studied, wherein any machine can get IP address and other configuration parameters. Now these configuration parameters, including IP address, is seen by all. Then any criminal or attacker can exploit this in multiple ways. Same happens in case of ARP, because you know, the communication happens in broadcast mode, because you know, first Alice machine broadcasts that who has this IP address, and then that machine responds, but all machine sees that and can exploit this information. All right. So we'll see in the next class some of the attacks we can do with, while you know, exploiting the vulnerabilities of ARP. Okay. All right. Thank you.